The sun had just begun to rise over the quiet suburban neighborhood, casting a soft golden glow on the streets. In her small but cozy apartment, Dr. Maya Thompson stood by the window, sipping her morning coffee. She was a woman of purpose, calm, composed, and deeply committed to helping others. As one of the few black doctors at Riverside Hospital, she often found herself working long hours, but today felt different. Today, something lingered in the air, an unspoken tension that seemed to echo through the otherwise peaceful morning. Maya adjusted her white coat, grabbed her bag, and headed out the door. Her shift started early, and public transport was her only option since her car was still in the shop. The bus stop was just a short walk away, but as she approached it, she noticed the usual crowd, a mix of students, office workers, and elderly residents all waiting patiently for the number 12 bus. When the bus finally arrived, its familiar creak and groan signaled the start of another ordinary day. Or so Maya thought. The driver, a middle-aged man named Carl, sat behind the wheel with a scowl etched across his face. He wasn't known for being particularly friendly. In fact, most passengers avoided eye contact with him altogether. There were whispers among the regulars about how rude he could be, especially toward certain groups of people. But Maya didn't pay much attention to those rumors. She simply wanted to get to work on time. As she stepped onto the bus, Carl glanced up briefly before returning, his gaze to the steering wheel. "Fares," he muttered gruffly, barely acknowledging her presence. Maya nodded politely and dropped the exact change into the fare box. She moved toward the back of the bus, finding an empty seat near the window. It was then that she noticed the atmosphere shift slightly. A few passengers exchanged uneasy looks while others kept their heads down, pretending not to notice anything unusual. Carl's behavior grew increasingly erratic as the bus continued along its route. He drove aggressively, braking suddenly and accelerating too quickly, causing some passengers to stumble. When a young mother struggled to fold her stroller before boarding, Carl snapped at her, yelling, "Hurry up! Some of us have schedules to keep." His voice carried a sharp edge that made everyone uncomfortable. Maya tried to ignore the growing unease around her. She focused instead on reviewing patient files on her phone, mentally preparing for the day ahead. But no matter how hard she concentrated, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just Carl's attitude. It was the way he seemed to single out specific passengers, making sarcastic remarks or refusing to answer their questions. At one point, an elderly man asked if they were stopping at Elm Street. Carl barked back, "Can't you read the sign? If you're too blind to see it, maybe you shouldn't be riding this bus." The man flushed red with embarrassment but said nothing, retreating to his seat in silence. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances but remaining quiet. No one dared confront Carl, not yet anyway. For Maya, this kind of treatment wasn't new. She'd faced prejudice throughout her life, from childhood bullies who mocked her skin color to colleagues who doubted her abilities because of stereotypes. Yet, every time she encountered such negativity, she reminded herself of her purpose: to heal, to inspire, and to rise above hatred. Still, there was only so much resilience anyone could muster when surrounded by hostility. As the bus neared her stop, Maya gathered her belongings and prepared to disembark. Just as she reached the front of the bus, Carl muttered under his breath, loud enough for her to hear, "Another entitled rider." His words stung, though she refused to let him see her reaction. With a deep breath, she stepped off the bus, feeling the weight of his disdain lingering behind her. Little did Maya know, this encounter was far from over. Something was brewing beneath the surface, and soon, the tension between them would come to a head in ways neither of them could predict. For now, however, she walked briskly toward the hospital, determined to leave the unpleasantness of the bus ride behind and focus on what truly mattered, her patients. But the seeds of conflict had already been planted, setting the stage for a journey neither Maya nor Carl could foresee. Dr. Maya Thompson entered Riverside Hospital, her sanctuary and second home. The sterile yet comforting smell of antiseptic greeted her as she made her way to the locker room. She changed into fresh scrubs, trying to push aside the lingering bitterness from her bus ride. Her mind shifted gears. Patients needed her full attention, and she wasn't about to let Carl's behavior distract her. Her first appointment was with Mrs. Jenkins, a kind elderly woman recovering from surgery. As Maya listened intently to her concerns, her professionalism shone through. "You're healing beautifully," Maya reassured her with a warm smile. "Just take it easy for the next few weeks." Mrs. Jenkins beamed, thanking her repeatedly. Moments like these reminded Maya why she had chosen this path, to make a difference in people's lives. But even as she moved from one patient to the next, Carl's words replayed in her mind. Another entitled writer. Though she tried to brush them off, they gnawed at her. It wasn't just what he said. It was the tone, the dismissive attitude that implied she didn't belong. Maya had faced similar attitudes before, but today felt heavier somehow. Perhaps it was because his hostility seemed so unjustified, or perhaps it was because she'd hoped humanity was evolving beyond such prejudice. During her lunch break, Maya sat alone in the staff lounge, scrolling through social media on her phone. A post caught her eye. A viral video of a bus driver being praised for helping a stranded commuter. The contrast between that story and her own experience struck her deeply. Why did some people choose kindness, while others clung to anger? Was it upbringing, fear, ignorance? She sighed, setting her phone aside. These questions wouldn't have answers anytime soon. Later that afternoon, Maya attended a team meeting with other doctors and nurses. They discussed new protocols for handling emergencies and shared updates on ongoing cases. When it was her turn to speak, Maya presented her latest research findings on improving patient care. Her colleagues listened attentively, nodding in agreement. For a moment, she forgot about everything outside these walls, all the negativity, all the judgment. Here she was respected not for the color of her skin but for her knowledge, dedication, and compassion. As the workday drew to a close, Maya prepared to leave the hospital. Exhausted but fulfilled, she stepped out into the cool evening air. The streets were quieter now, bathed in the soft orange glow of streetlights. She decided to walk partway home, hoping the fresh air would clear her thoughts. The rhythmic sound of her footsteps echoed against the pavement as she reflected on the day. Her mind wandered back to Carl. What drove someone like him? Did he wake up each morning intending to spread hostility? Or was it something deeper? A lifetime of resentment bubbling over? Maya wondered if anyone had ever tried talking to him, understanding his perspective. Maybe no one had bothered because his behavior made him seem unreachable. But deep down, she believed everyone deserved a chance to change, even someone like Carl. Lost in thought, Maya didn't notice the figure approaching until they were almost face to face. It was an older man dressed in worn clothes holding a tattered backpack. He hesitated, then spoke softly. "Excuse me, miss. Do you know where I can find a shelter around here?" His voice trembled slightly, betraying both fear and hope. Maya stopped, her heart softening immediately. "Of course," she replied gently. She pulled out her phone and searched for nearby shelters, guiding him step by step on how to get there. Before he left, he thanked her profusely, tears glistening in his eyes. "God bless you," he whispered. That brief encounter left Maya feeling oddly grounded. Despite the challenges she faced daily, the subtle jabs, the outright discrimination, she still chose kindness. And maybe, just maybe, that choice mattered more than anything else. Yet, as she continued walking, her thoughts drifted back to Carl. Kindness might be powerful, but it couldn't fix everything overnight. Still, she couldn't shake the idea that their paths were destined to cross again. Something told her this wasn't the end of their story, it was only the beginning. Unbeknownst to Maya, Carl was also grappling with his actions from earlier that day. Back at the bus depot, he sat alone in the driver's seat, staring blankly ahead. Passengers came and went throughout his shift, but none stayed long enough to see the storm brewing inside him. Guilt, anger, and confusion swirled together, creating a volatile mix he didn't know how to untangle. For now, their worlds remained separate, but fate had other plans. Neither Maya nor Carl realized it yet, but their lives were intertwined, in ways neither could imagine, and when they met again, it would force them both to confront truths they'd rather avoid. The next morning, Carl arrived at the bus depot earlier than usual. His reflection in the rearview mirror showed dark circles under his eyes and a furrowed brow. Sleep had eluded him the previous night, haunted by thoughts he couldn't quite name. He replayed moments from his route: the elderly man who asked about Elm Street, the young mother struggling with her stroller, and finally the calm yet piercing gaze of Dr. Maya Thompson as she stepped off the bus. Carl wasn't used to, questioning himself. For years, he'd prided himself on being direct, no nonsense. Life had taught him to keep people at arm's length. Vulnerability only led to disappointment. But now, doubt crept into his mind like an unwelcome guest. Had he been too harsh? Too quick to judge? These questions gnawed at him, though he tried to push them away. As passengers began boarding for the morning shift, Carl forced himself to focus. "Fares," he barked mechanically, avoiding eye contact. Yet every time someone hesitated or fumbled with change, his irritation flared. It was easier to stay angry than to confront the unease simmering beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Maya started her day much like any other. After a restful night, she felt recharged and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Still, the memory of Carl lingered at the edges of her thoughts. She wondered if she should report his behavior. After all, public transport was meant to be safe and respectful for everyone, but something held her back. Reporting him might escalate tensions without addressing the root cause. Maybe there was another way. On her way to work, Maya boarded the number 12 bus again. This time, Carl barely glanced up as she paid her fare. She took a seat near the middle, observing him discreetly. His stiff posture and clenched jaw suggested inner turmoil, though none of the passengers seemed to notice, or perhaps they chose not to. Either way, the atmosphere remained tense. At one stop, a teenage boy hesitated before getting on. His oversized hoodie and nervous demeanor made Carl bristle. "You got money?" Carl snapped, leaning forward slightly. The boy nodded quickly, dropping coins into the fare box. As he shuffled toward the back, Carl muttered under his breath loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Kids these days, always looking suspicious. Maya watched the exchange silently, her heart sinking. She recognized the pattern: judgment, based on appearance, assumptions rooted in prejudice. It saddened her to see how easily fear could twist into hostility. For a brief moment, she considered speaking up, but she decided against it. Confrontation here wouldn't help. Timing mattered. Later, that afternoon, after finishing her rounds at the hospital, Maya attended a community outreach event hosted by Riverside Hospital. The program aimed to bridge gaps between healthcare providers and underserved neighborhoods. Volunteers handed out free medical supplies, offered health screenings, and shared resources with anyone who stopped by. While volunteering, Maya struck up a conversation with a fellow doctor named Priya. They discussed the challenges of working in diverse communities, including biases they encountered both personally and professionally. When Priya mentioned dealing with difficult individuals, Maya found herself recounting her experiences with Carl, not naming him specifically, but describing the situation. Priya listened thoughtfully before responding. "Sometimes we forget that hurt people often hurt others. That doesn't excuse their behavior, but understanding where it comes from can give us perspective." Her words resonated deeply with Maya. Could Carl's hostility stem from pain rather than pure malice? If so, what could she do about it? That evening, as Maya walked home, she passed a small park where children played and families gathered. Laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the tension she'd experienced earlier. Watching the scene unfold, she realized how interconnected humanity truly was. Every action rippled outward, affecting those around us in ways we might never fully understand. Back at the bus depot, Carl sat alone once more, staring out the windshield. A coworker approached, offering a friendly greeting, but Carl grunted in response. He didn't want company. He needed space to think. Images of the day replayed in his mind. The teenage boy's fearful expression, the elderly woman clutching her purse tightly as she exited the bus, and Maya's quiet composure despite his rudeness. For the first time, Carl allowed himself to wonder what others saw when they looked at him. Was he just a grumpy bus driver, or was he something worse? The thought unsettled him, stirring emotions he hadn't faced in years. He wanted to believe he was better than this, to believe he hadn't let bitterness consume him entirely. Unbeknownst to either of them, fate continued weaving its threads. Maya and Carl were bound to cross paths again, and when they did, the encounter would force them both to confront uncomfortable truths. Neither knew it yet, but their lives were on a collision course, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. As night fell over the city, two very different souls prepared for another day, unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. The following morning dawned crisp and clear, with a gentle breeze rustling through the trees. Maya stepped out of her apartment feeling lighter than she had in days. The community outreach event had reminded her of the power of compassion, and she carried that energy with her as she walked to the bus stop. She knew Carl would likely be driving the number 12 again. His schedule was predictable, but for the first time she felt ready to face him. When the bus arrived, Carl's demeanor hadn't changed. His usual scowl greeted passengers as they boarded, his voice curt and impersonal. "Fares," he muttered, barely glancing up. Maya paid her fare without incident and took a seat near the front this time, close enough to observe him but far enough to avoid drawing attention. As the bus rumbled along its route, an elderly woman struggled to climb aboard. Her cane slipped slightly on the step, causing her to wobble. Carl sighed audibly, leaning back, in his seat with visible impatience. "Ma'am, you need to hurry up," he said sharply. "I don't have all day." Maya's heart sank at his tone, but something inside her stirred, a quiet determination. Before she could second-guess herself, she stood and approached the woman. "Here, let me help you," she said softly, offering her arm for support. The woman smiled gratefully, leaning on Maya as they made their way to a nearby seat. Carl watched the exchange through the rearview mirror, his jaw tightening. For a moment, guilt flickered across his face, though he quickly masked it with indifference. Still, the brief pause was enough to catch Maya's attention. She returned to her seat, her mind racing. Perhaps there was more to Carl than met the eye, a fractured soul hiding behind anger and resentment. Later that day, during her lunch break, Maya found herself reflecting on the encounter. She recalled Priya's words about hurt people hurting others. Could Carl's behavior stem from unresolved pain? If so, what could she do to reach him? The idea of confronting him directly still felt daunting, but ignoring the situation didn't sit right either. After work, Maya decided to take a detour on her way home. Instead of heading straight to the bus stop, she wandered into a small cafe she'd passed countless times but never entered. The cozy interior welcomed her with warm lighting and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. She ordered a latte and settled into a corner table, pulling out her journal. Writing had always been a form of therapy for Maya, a way to process her thoughts and emotions. Today, she poured her heart onto the page, exploring her feelings about Carl and the dynamics of prejudice. As she wrote, clarity began to emerge. She realized that while she couldn't control Carl's actions, she could choose how she responded. Compassion, she decided, might be the key to breaking through his defenses. Back at the bus depot, Carl sat alone in the driver's seat, staring blankly ahead. The day's events replayed in his mind: the elderly woman's struggle, Maya's kindness, and each memory chipped away at his carefully constructed walls. He hated feeling vulnerable, yet he couldn't deny the pang of shame that lingered. Why did he lash out so often? What was he afraid of? His phone buzzed suddenly, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a text from his sister, reminding him of their mother's birthday dinner that weekend. Carl groaned inwardly. Family gatherings were always awkward. His siblings rarely understood him, and conversations often devolved into arguments. Still, he owed it to his mom to show up. As the week progressed, Tensions between Carl and his passengers grew increasingly palpable. One afternoon, a young girl accidentally dropped her school books while boarding. Pages scattered across the floor, and she scrambled to gather them. Carl rolled his eyes, muttering under his breath, "Can't anyone just get on properly?" Unbeknownst to him, another passenger, an older man seated nearby, noticed the exchange. After helping the girl pick up her books, the man turned to Carl. "You know," he said calmly, "we're all just trying to get where we need to go. A little patience goes a long way." Carl stiffened, caught off guard by the unexpected comment. For a moment, he wanted to snap back to defend himself, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the man's calm tone or the sincerity in his eyes. Whatever it was, Carl bit his tongue and remained silent. That night, as he drove the final leg of his shift, Carl's thoughts drifted to Maya. She hadn't said a word to him since the incident with the elderly woman, yet her presence lingered in his mind. There was something about her quiet strength, her unwavering composure, that unsettled him. He didn't like feeling scrutinized, but part of him wondered if she saw something in him that no one else did. Meanwhile, Maya continued her routine, balancing work and personal reflection. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she trusted that even small acts of kindness could create ripples of change. Little did she know, those ripples were already beginning to reach Carl. Their paths were destined to cross again soon, and when they did, neither would emerge unchanged. The stage was set for a confrontation neither anticipated, one that would challenge their perceptions and force them to confront truths they'd rather avoid. The next morning, the air was brisk, carrying with it the faint scent of autumn leaves. Maya stepped onto the number 12 bus once again, her heart steady but her mind alert. She had decided that today would be different, not because she expected anything monumental to happen, but because she wanted to approach Carl with intention. If there was even a sliver of hope for understanding between them, she owed it to herself, and perhaps to him, to try. Carl glanced up briefly as Maya paid her fare. His expression remained neutral, though his eyes lingered on her for a fraction, longer than usual. He quickly looked away, focusing instead on the road ahead. Still, Maya noticed the subtle shift, a flicker of curiosity or maybe unease. It gave her courage. She took a seat near the middle of the bus, close enough to observe without being intrusive. As the bus moved along its route, passengers boarded and disembarked in their usual rhythm. An elderly man struggled with his grocery bags, prompting Carl to tap the steering wheel impatiently. "Come on, hurry up," he muttered under his breath. This time, Maya didn't hesitate. She stood, walked to the front, and extended a hand to the man. "Let me help you," she said, gently, lifting one of the heavier bags. The man smiled gratefully, murmuring thanks as they found him a seat. When Maya returned to her place, she caught Carl watching her in the rearview mirror. Their eyes met briefly before he turned his gaze back to the road. For the rest of the ride, an unspoken tension hung in the air. Carl's driving seemed less aggressive than usual, almost cautious, as if he were weighing every action. Maya sensed that something within him was shifting, though she couldn't pinpoint what. Perhaps it was the cumulative effect of her quiet defiance, her refusal to let his hostility go unanswered, or maybe it was the growing weight of his own conscience. Later that afternoon, after finishing her rounds at the hospital, Maya attended a workshop on conflict resolution. The speaker emphasized the importance of empathy and active listening, urging attendees to seek common ground even in difficult situations. One phrase resonated deeply with her. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to extend a hand. Inspired by the session, Maya decided to take a small step toward bridging the gap between her and Carl. On her way home that evening, she boarded the number 12 bus again. This time, when she reached the fare box, she paused and offered a polite smile. "Thank you for getting us where we need to go," she said softly, her voice calm but sincere. Carl froze, caught off guard by her words. For a moment, he didn't respond, his fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly. Then, almost reluctantly, he nodded. "You're welcome," he mumbled, barely audible over the hum of the engine. It wasn't much, but it was progress. A crack in the wall he'd built around himself. That night, as Carl sat alone in the driver's seat during his break, he replayed the interaction in his mind. Her smile, her tone, it hadn't been mocking or condescending. Instead, it had been genuine, as if she truly meant what she said. Why would someone like her bother acknowledging him? Didn't she see how flawed he was? His thoughts drifted to his childhood, memories he'd buried long ago. Growing up poor in a rough neighborhood, Carl had learned early on to keep people at a distance. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, and kindness often felt like a trap. Over time, he'd hardened, himself convincing others and eventually himself that he didn't need anyone. But now cracks were forming in that armor, letting doubts and questions seep through. Meanwhile, Maya reflected on her decision to speak to Carl. She knew she couldn't fix everything overnight, but she believed in the power of small gestures. Building trust took time, especially with someone as guarded as Carl. Yet she felt hopeful. There was a vulnerability beneath his gruff exterior, and if she could reach it, maybe there was a chance for change. The following day brought another opportunity. A young mother boarded the bus with a crying toddler in tow. The child's wails filled the cabin, drawing irritated glances from several passengers. Carl clenched his jaw, clearly annoyed. Before he could say anything, Maya leaned forward and addressed the mother. "Is there anything I can do to help?" she asked kindly. The woman hesitated, then handed her a pacifier from her bag. "Would you mind?" she began, gesturing awkwardly. Without hesitation, Maya accepted the item and handed it to the toddler, who quieted almost instantly. The mother exhaled in relief, mouthing a silent thank you. Carl watched the exchange silently, his hands gripping the wheel tighter. Something about Maya's actions struck a chord within him. He remembered his own struggles raising his daughter as a single father, the exhaustion and frustration of dealing with a fussy child while juggling work. Those memories felt distant now, buried under layers of bitterness, but they still lingered raw and tender. As the week drew to a close, Carl found himself looking forward to seeing Maya on his route, not out of obligation, but out of curiosity. What drove someone like her? How could she remain so composed in the face of hostility? And why did her presence make him question everything he thought he knew about people? Unbeknownst to either of them, their shared moments were weaving threads of connection, however fragile. Neither Maya nor Carl realized it yet, but their lives were slowly intertwining in ways neither could have predicted. The foundation for change had been laid. All that remained was for them to take the next step together. The weekend arrived, bringing with it a brief pause in Carl's usual routine. Saturday mornings were always quieter at the bus depot, fewer passengers, fewer demands. Carl used the courier time to clean and prepare his bus for the coming week, though his mind was anything but still. Images of Maya kept surfacing, unbidden, her calm demeanor, her unexpected kindness, and most of all, her simple "thank you" that had shaken him more than he cared to admit. As he wiped down the seats, Carl replayed their interactions over and over. He couldn't understand why she bothered engaging with him when he'd been nothing but rude. Most people would have written him off by now, avoided his route altogether. But not her. She seemed determined to see something in him that even he struggled to recognize, a flicker of humanity buried beneath years of bitterness. Later that afternoon, Carl attended his mother's birthday dinner at his sister's house. The gathering was lively, filled with laughter and chatter, yet Carl felt disconnected from it all. His siblings teased each other good-naturedly, while his nieces and nephews ran around the living room, squealing with delight. Carl sat quietly, in a corner, picking at his food, feeling like an outsider in his own family. "Carl, are you even listening?" His sister interrupted, snapping him out of his thoughts. She had asked him about work, expecting some gruff response or sarcastic remark. Instead, he hesitated, unsure how to articulate what he was feeling. "It's fine," he muttered finally, avoiding eye contact. But the words felt hollow, even to him. Fine wasn't accurate. Not anymore. Work wasn't just a job anymore. It had become a battleground where his inner demons clashed with glimpses of hope he didn't know how to process. His mother noticed his distraction and pulled him aside after dessert. "What's going on with you, sweetheart?" she asked gently, her voice soft with concern. Carl shrugged, unwilling or unable to put his turmoil into words, yet something about her warmth made him want to try. "There's this woman," he began haltingly, surprising himself. "She rides my bus sometimes. I've been difficult, to say the least. But she doesn't act like everyone else. She's kind." His mother listened intently, nodding, as he spoke. When he finished, she smiled knowingly. "Maybe she sees something in you that you've forgotten," she said softly. "Sometimes, people show us who we can be, even when we don't believe it ourselves." Her words lingered long. After the party ended, that night as Carl lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he thought about his mother's advice. Could Maya really see something worth saving in him? Or was he reading too much into her actions? Either way, her presence had stirred something deep within him, something he couldn't ignore any longer. Meanwhile, Maya spent her weekend reflecting on her encounters with Carl. She hadn't told anyone about her decision to reach out to him, not even her closest friends. It felt personal, almost sacred, a quiet attempt to bridge a gap she believed could be crossed if given enough patience and effort. On Sunday evening, she decided to write in her journal again, documenting her thoughts and feelings. Writing helped her untangle the complexities of human behavior, especially when faced with prejudice. This time, however, her focus shifted slightly. Instead of analyzing Carl's hostility, she explored her motivations for helping him. "I'm not doing this because I think I can fix him," she wrote. "I'm doing it because I believe in the power of connection. We're all capable of change no matter how broken we feel. And maybe, just maybe, my small acts of kindness will remind him of that." Monday morning came quickly, and Maya boarded the number 12 bus once again. As she approached the fare box, she noticed Carl seemed different, less tense, more observant. Their eyes met briefly, and this time he offered a slight nod in acknowledgement. It was subtle, but it meant something. Throughout the ride, Carl's behavior softened noticeably. When a passenger dropped their wallet, he surprised everyone by stopping the bus momentarily to retrieve it. Later, when a child spilled juice on the floor, he simply sighed and handed the parent a napkin instead of snapping at them. Maya watched silently, sensing the shift. After disembarking, she lingered near the stop, waiting until the bus pulled away before pulling out her phone. She sent a text to Priya, the colleague she'd spoken to earlier. "I think I might be getting through to him." Priya replied almost immediately. "That's incredible, Maya. Keep going. You never know what kind of impact you're having." Maya smiled, tucking her phone back into her bag. She didn't need validation, but knowing someone supported her efforts gave her strength. Still, she knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Change took time, and Carl's walls weren't fully down yet, but progress, no matter how small, was worth celebrating. Unbeknownst to Maya, Carl was grappling with similar emotions. Back at the depot, he stared out the windshield, replaying the day's events. Each moment of restraint, each suppressed urge to lash out, felt like a victory, a step toward reclaiming the person he used to be. Their journey was far from over, but the barriers between them were beginning to crumble. Neither realized it yet, but they were inching closer to a breakthrough, one that would redefine not only their relationship, but also how they viewed themselves and the world around them. The weeks passed, and the dynamic between Carl and Maya continued to evolve. What had once been a strained and distant relationship began to transform into something neither of them could have predicted. Each interaction, whether a polite nod, a brief exchange of words, or simply shared moments of quiet understanding, was like a brick laid in the foundation of trust. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled around the bus stop, Maya boarded the number 12 bus with a sense of anticipation. She wasn't sure why, but she felt that today might be different. Carl greeted her with a curt, "Good morning," his tone less abrasive than usual. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it carried weight, a sign that progress was being made. As the bus traveled its route, an elderly man struggled to find exact change for his fare. His hands trembled as he fumbled with coins, drawing impatient sighs from some passengers. Before Carl could intervene, Maya stepped forward. "Here, let me cover it," she said gently, dropping the necessary amount into the fare box. The man looked relieved, offering a grateful smile. "Thank you, miss," he murmured. Maya nodded warmly before returning to her seat. This time, however, Carl spoke up. "Wait," he called out gruffly, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a few coins and handed them to Maya. "For next time," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. Maya blinked in surprise, then smiled softly. "Thank you, Carl." Her voice was steady, sincere, and filled with gratitude, not just for the gesture itself, but for what it represented. For the first time, Carl had chosen kindness over hostility, even if only in a small way. Later that day, during a rare break at the hospital, Maya reflected on the moment. She realized that Carl's act of repayment wasn't about the money. It was about taking responsibility, about showing that he cared enough to try. It was another step forward, one more crack in the wall he'd built around himself. Meanwhile, Carl sat alone at the depot, replaying the incident in his mind. Handing those coins to Maya had felt strange yet liberating, as if he were reclaiming a part of himself he'd long forgotten. He thought about his mother's words. "Sometimes people show us who we can be." Maybe Maya was doing exactly that, reminding him of the person he wanted to be. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Carl decided to take a bold step. After finishing his shift, he drove to a local bookstore, something he hadn't done in years. He wandered through the aisles aimlessly until he stumbled upon a section labeled Self-Help. Skeptical but curious, he picked up a book titled The Power of Kindness. Flipping through its pages, he found stories of redemption and transformation that resonated deeply with him. Back home, Carl read late into the night, absorbing every word. The book challenged him to confront his biases, to question where his anger stemmed from, and most importantly, to recognize the humanity in others and in himself. By the time he turned off the light, his perspective had shifted slightly but significantly. The next morning, Carl arrived at the depot earlier than usual. As passengers began boarding, he greeted each one with a quiet politeness that surprised many. When Maya stepped onto the bus, Carl offered her a hesitant smile. "Morning," he said, his voice softer than ever before. Maya returned the smile, sensing the change in him. "Morning, Carl." Their connection had grown stronger, though neither fully understood how far-reaching it would become. Over time, Carl's behavior improved dramatically. He became known not as the grumpy bus driver, but as someone who went out of his way to help passengers. Whether it was assisting an elderly woman with her groceries or stopping briefly to ensure a child safely crossed the street, Carl embraced opportunities to make a positive impact. Maya noticed these changes and felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her belief in compassion and connection had sparked a chain reaction, proving that even the hardest hearts could soften with patience and understanding. Still, she knew Carl's journey was his own, and she respected the effort he put into changing. One day, after months of gradual transformation, Carl approached Maya as she prepared to disembark. "Dr. Thompson," he began nervously, I wanted to thank you." His words caught her off guard, and she turned to face him fully. "For what?" she asked gently. "For seeing me when no one else did," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't give up on me, even when I didn't deserve it." Maya's eyes softened, and she placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We all deserve a chance to grow, Carl. You've come so far, you should be proud of yourself." Tears welled in Carl's eyes, but he blinked them away, nodding firmly. From that moment on, their bond deepened further. They became unlikely, allies united by mutual respect and a shared belief in the power of human connection. In the end, their story wasn't just about overcoming prejudice. It was about redemption, resilience, and the courage to change. Carl learned that kindness wasn't weakness. It was strength. And Maya discovered that even the smallest acts of compassion could ripple outward, touching lives in ways she never imagined. As they continued along their separate paths, both carried the lessons they'd learned together. Their encounter had changed them forever, proving that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with a simple choice: to see, to listen, and to care.